All right, cycle 1, week 19. These were what we did in my class as a tutor to the Abecedarian / Apprentice age group. Let's get into it. Okay, so for timeline, we sat on the floor, and after, we always introduce the timeline in our morning meeting before we go to our classrooms. So we'd already done that. But we came into the classroom, we sat on the floor, and I shuffled up the timeline cards and laid them out, and then had the kids help put them in order. And so we did that several times. For math, of course, we sang this song. We're using a geometry song that we have used, like everybody in our campus uses. But I also this week used these cards that I made, these equation cards. And so I handed them out, and the kids came up onto the board, and they put A equals pi, sorry, I don't have hands, R squared. And we put those up on the board. If you have the younger ones, you can do these so you don't have to have the different pieces or whatever. That's a file, but I created this on Etsy. But I used those, and the kids came up to the board and put the equation in order. So that's a different math. For history, I used Driven by Grace's hand motions like I usually do. So we did Anasazi, and then Southwestern United States, Adobe Villages, and then caves and sides of cliffs, 500 BC to AD 1200. So, I always link to her videos so that you can go see the original, but that's what we used. So we did that, and then we used the visual cards this week. And so I had the kids come up to the board, I handed them out, they were scrambled up, and they brought their piece up to the board, put them in order, and then took them down, scrambled them up, did it again. So that's what we did with those as well. For history, I was going to use Q-tips like I've done, where they draw it with a dry erase, and then they use a Q-tip to erase it and as a pointer. But if you watch my video from last week, or from week 18, that's 2 weeks ago for us, but we laid the big map on the floor and sat on the map and pointed to it, and that was just, we enjoyed doing that. So I did that again today. So I had the Q-tips with me, but ended up changing my mind, and I just put the map on the floor, and we sat on it and around it and pointed to the areas together. I feel like, especially for those little ones, they have such a hard time finding things on their little map. Sometimes when we're all together on the bigger map, that makes it a little bit easier. So it was fun. So we did that with maps. Science, this was super fun. I was really, I can't claim this idea. I saw it in the tutor group and immediately had to steal it because I loved it. So the 4 ocean zones, if you've ever watched the movie Finding Nemo, the beginning, when Marlin is taking Nemo to his class for the first time, and the teacher is Mr. Ray, a stingray, and he's coming along and he sings a song, and he sings the 4 ocean zones. So that's what we did. So I brought a quilt, and I put it over my shoulders like this and held my hands out. I had the kids sit on the floor in a little clump, and I zoomed around the classroom with the quilt flapping out behind me to be like my starfish wings, and sang the song. So I'm going to put a link to that clipped from the video on YouTube so that you can hear it. But he sings, "Let's name the zones, the zones, the zones. Let's name the zones of the ocean, open sea." And then he lists the ocean zones, and but he like flops down on the kids in the movie, all the little fishy kids. So I took the quilt and I flopped it over the kids, and then I would say, "Where has my class gone?" And then they would just laugh and poke their heads out from under the quilt. So we did that several times. They thought it was hilarious. I thought it was fun. So that's what we did for science this week. And I had them, we did like a call and repeat thing several times also, because those are hard words for me to pronounce, hard words for the kids to pronounce. And even though I was singing that song, I didn't feel like they could, it wasn't, I slowed it down a little bit from how he sings it in the movie, but I still felt like it was hard. So we also did some call and repeat type stuff. Okay, helping verbs. We've been doing a helping verb song, so the kids really all know this one by this point. So we sang that all the way through to get all of our helping verbs, and then we just said shall, will, can multiple times real fast. And then for Latin, this second semester, we've just been doing exercises always during Latin. And so we did like leg raises to the left, leg raises to the right. I just totally did the wrong hands, but you know what I mean. Arm circles, and then a stretch that when I used to take an exercise class, and our instructor always called these good mornings. I don't know. We put our hands like this, and then, you know, kind of like stretch down and stretch back. And so we did good mornings. So we did those while we listened to the songs 4 times. Okay, so that was new grammar. And then for, we'll talk about science. I don't usually talk about science because I feel like it's all pretty similar in what you do. But there was some more, I don't know, variability, some things that we learned, some stuff I wanted to share. Okay, so we were doing crystals today, and at our campus, we paint our crystals on black cardstock. So I know that a lot of people do either a mirror or a window, and we do have mirrors. And so we actually did both. Our director didn't realize that we had mirrors in storage from previous years. So she had gotten the black cardstock and then she found the mirrors. So we ended up doing both. But we learned when we did the black cardstock that you have to put a pretty thick layer on there. If you do it really thin, the crystals don't show up super well. And here's what it kind of looks like. I don't know how well you can see that in the video, but it turned out really cool. So I introduced the topic, and they painted on their black paper and on the mirror, and then we mixed up our solution, talked about that, painted the stuff, and set that aside. And then while that was drying, I brought in, I have this DK Picturepedia book, and it had several pages about minerals and rocks. Oh yeah. And so we just kind of looked at some pictures of minerals and rocks. You can do it from any book. And also some of the print-offs on CC Connected have pictures. So, but I just brought those in because I already had those. So we did that. And then I did something that I saw from Emily the homeschooler. I always watch her science video, not recaps, but instructions in my preparation. And something she recommended doing that I thought was really fun was I brought a bunch of different block/building materials from my house for my kids to use, my students at CC. So I brought brain flakes, and I brought a baggie of Duplos. I brought plus blocks. I'm not going to pull everything out. I also had some wooden blocks, some squigs, which are kind of like suction-y, magnetiles, and then also brought a couple of different puzzles. Some were puzzles that could only be done one way that were flat, and some were more like those foam toddler puzzles, and they could be done some different ways. And so I handed each of the kids, actually had such a small group today, they were able to have two different things. So like plus blocks and brain flakes, or magnetiles and Duplos. So I handed them each that, and I had them create something. And I said, we're going to make some minerals. We're going to talk about how, how are they formed? What's the same? What's different? That kind of thing. And so they built their two different creations, which one per kid would have been plenty. I just had excess and then had a small class because we had some kids out. And so we did that. And then we talked about some discussion questions. These were from Emily the homeschooler's video. Her name's Emily Phillips, by the way. I should always call her by her handle. But we talked about why did you choose to build that shape? Because you were kind of limited by your pieces, right? Were there shapes you couldn't make? Was your mineral strong or weak? Did it break easily? So we talked about how the Duplos were stronger because they were interlocked, and the plus blocks versus the magnetiles where they're magnets and they fall apart pretty easily. Why are some of them big? Why are some of them small? Based on the size of pieces and the number of pieces. Who had the most pieces available to them? Who had the fewest? Did that affect the size of the mineral? If you had a smaller number of pieces, did that affect that your mineral was small? Not necessarily, because it depended on the size of the pieces. So anyway, and then we just talked about the minerals were different because the toys that I gave them were different. They could only be put together certain ways depending on what that toy was. Some of them had a lot of options. Some of them, like the puzzle, could only have there's only one way to put it together because that's the pieces only interlocked one way. And then we talked about how minerals also follow rules, and they only make the shapes their atoms can take. It's determined by their chemistry, that kind of thing. So you can go watch her video and kind of write down the questions that she talked about. But so that was kind of a fun thing to do while they were waiting for their creations to dry. And so we talked about that. And then by that point, everything was dry and we were able to get our magnifying glasses out and look at those. And the kids were really blown away by the crystals that created. And I thought it was awesome too. I hadn't done it. Well, I tried it at home without Epsom salts. I'd used magnesium bath salts. Does not work the same way. So I hadn't seen it either yet in person. So, that was fun. So that's my little thing about science, is just make sure if you're going to use the black paper that you do a pretty good coating, not like a super light coating, because it won't crystallize. Okay, then for orchestra. So in the guide, orchestra says, so for week 19, you're supposed to just introduce orchestra and listen to the 3 pieces at least once, maybe twice. And then weeks 20, 21, 22, you listen to each one of the pieces more thoroughly several times. And then week 23, you introduce like the names of the instruments. And then week 24 is kind of just like a review celebration type week. That's what the guide says to do, but most of the lesson plans that I've read, what our campus has done, does not quite do it in that order. I saw one campus changes their order totally, and they move week 23 to week 19. So for week 19, they talk about all the instruments and the orchestra. And then week 20, introduce the 3 pieces. And then 21, 22, 23, listen to them thoroughly, and then 24. So they switch, kind of move week 23 at the beginning, which I think is really great. I didn't even see that as really, that didn't pop into my head until we were already close to being to this week. And so I didn't think to suggest it to our campus. But what we do is fine too. So anyway, I'm saying all this to say what I'm sharing is not exactly what the guide says to do. We just move it around a little bit. So take this with a grain of salt, use it however your campus does it, whatever. But I did introduce the orchestra a little bit. I use, there's a creator on YouTube, Stephanie Laughlin, I guess is how you pronounce her last name. I used her videos when I was planning for Tin Whistle. She's excellent. She obviously has a musical background. And so I've been using her videos to prep for orchestra, and so those are linked in my lesson plan blog post that I always share, so if you want to check those out, you can. But I just kind of went through hers and wrote down the things that she said to say and used those. So talked a little bit about orchestra, and I introduced the families. I bought these Meet the Instrument flashcards from this Squilt place, which stands for Super Quiet Uninterrupted Listening Time. It's like a whole musical curriculum thing. She's a CC mom, but it's like a musical curriculum. You can get separate. I just got the cards because they went well with what we're doing. But we used these to introduce woodwinds, percussion, strings, and brass. And there's more cards for the individual things that I'll get to in some more later weeks. But just for today, we just introduced the 4 families, talked about those a little bit, talked about their characteristics, used that. And then we talked about the Baroque and the classical periods. So I brought in my timeline cards for Baroque and classical periods. And we started to sing the timeline song, like a few things before the Baroque period of the arts, and then sang through a few after the classical period of the arts, and talked about what was happening in history. Specifically, we kind of zeroed in on like Jamestown and Plymouth Colony, right before or around the Baroque period, and then American Revolution right around the classical period, to try to connect like what was happening, on our side of the world during that time, things that they might be more familiar with in history. So we talked about that a little bit. I showed them these orchestra seating charts for the Baroque period and the classical period, and we looked at how they were same, how they were different, and these are on CC Connected, so I have those linked. So we talked about those things, and then I also had this printed off, which is basically what I did with those Meet the Instrument cards, just all on one page. This is more for a reference for future weeks where I can put it up and they can see that on my board. So we talked about those things, and then I gave a few facts about the Baroque era and a few facts about the classical era. And then I had them, we happened to have only 6 kids today, and we have 6 round tables in our room. So I had them each pick a table and go underneath the table. They had stuffies and pillows and blankets and different things they had brought from home that I told them last time to bring if they wanted to. And so they got under the tables, we turned off the lights, we listened to all 3 pieces just in silence. I asked them a few questions like, how are they the same? How are they different? Did you notice anything? And they gave me a few answers, but really it was mostly just to listen. And that's what the guide is really wanting to do, is like teaching kids or having the kids listen and listen well. And so that's what we tried to do. Like I said, I did a little bit of introduction to the orchestra right now so that it's not all the way at the end at week 23, but we didn't do a ton, and mostly we just listened. All right, and then for review, we played Bug Swat. This is a little thing that I created that's just a bunch of bugs that I've cut out and laminated. And I did it a little differently. So when I did it back in the fall, I wrote on the back of them like week 3 history, week 4 science. And when they slapped the bug and flipped it over, it told us which thing we needed to review. This time instead I put points on the back. So I just drew out of my little thing of cards what we were going to review. And we reviewed it, and then they slapped a bug and got the points for their team. And we just went back and forth, and you know, one team would get points and the other team would get points. So that's how we played it this time. So pretty flexible. I just bring in fly swatters and my little bugs, I lay them out on the table and they just slap them. So that is all we did for week 19. It's kind of a longer video, but had a lot to talk about. So hope that helped, and I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.